Not every mind fits a system. Some work best in the gaps, the places where doctrines stop being useful and certainty starts getting in the way. So here's the question we're opening with. When familiar story structures fail, how do writers actually solve the problems in front of them? This is a bonus file, the kind tucked away in dusty corners of police archives, the ones marked miscellaneous or unrelated incidents. The cases that don't fit the patterns, but might just hold the key to everything. These aren't people who built cathedrals. They don't design grand structures meant to impress from a distance. They build tools, sharp ones, made for specific problems. Used once, sometimes twice, then set aside. This is the investigation anatomy of story, my personal journey into the hidden patterns beneath all stories. This case file isn't about movements or methods. It's about understanding how stories actually work when the familiar structures stop helping. What follows isn't doctrine. There are no commandments here, nothing you're required to believe. Some of these files won't fit neatly, but that's the point. The thinkers gathered here didn't found schools. They didn't gather disciples or promise salvation. They noticed where storytelling broke down, built something precise to address it, and moved on. Their ideas weren't meant to explain everything. They were meant to solve something. This is a supplementary file, an optional, and even by design. If you're comfortable with well-travelled roads, you won't need it. But if you're the kind of writer who reads footnotes, checks sources, and keeps an eye out for odd pieces that don't quite belong, this is where you might find something useful. Not a method, a way through. They stop looking for systems that explain everything and start using tools that solve the problem in front of them. In no particular order then, here are the outliers, the architects between the lines. Case file Lehos Igri. Character before everything. Igri was a Hungarian-born playwright who emigrated to the United States in the early 20th century, fleeing the political turmoil that engulfed Eastern Europe following the Great War. His accent thick as molasses, his observations sharp as a razor's edge. He made his living in theatre, taught writing in New York, and spent decades watching plays succeed or collapse on stage, watching them breathe their first breath and sometimes their last. He sat in darkened theatres, notebook in hand, studying audiences as they laughed, wept, or worse, checked their watches. And that mattered, because Igri didn't theorise from abstraction. He theorised from failure, from the sound of seats folding up as patrons left at intermission, from the polite, hollow applause that signals a story's death. He performed autopsies on fallen plays while others celebrated the successes. His central claim was simple and still dangerous. Character drives story, not the other way round. In an era when plot was king, this was heresy. While others were constructing elaborate narrative machines, Igri was insisting that human nature was the only engine that truly mattered. He believed every story lived or died on a premise, a provable argument about human behaviour. Not a theme, mind you, but an equation. A hypothesis to be tested under the hot lights of dramatic conflict. He demanded that writers state their premise with brutal clarity before typing Act 1. If a character is greedy, cowardly, proud, or generous, the story must pressure that trait until it evolves or breaks them. No escape hatches, no convenient plot twists. Just the unavoidable logic of who these people are, driven to its ultimate conclusion. Reach for Igri when your plot works but your characters feel hollow, like mannequins posed in dramatic tableau. Or scenes happen but nothing changes, leaving your audience with a nagging feeling they've witnessed movement without momentum. You need causality that comes from personality, not events. When you need the disaster to feel inevitable, not convenient. Igri didn't build a system, he built a pressure test, a way to determine if your characters could withstand the strain of authentic drama, or if they'd collapse under scrutiny, revealing themselves as mere puppets dancing on the strings of plot convenience. Case file, Linda Seeger, the fixer. Seeger didn't come up through myth or philosophy. She came up through notes. Endless notes, scrawled in margins of dog-eared scripts delivered across conference tables to anxious writers trying to decipher what exactly wasn't working in their third act. In the early 1980s, she effectively invented the modern role of script consultant, reading, diagnosing and repairing screenplays for writers, producers and studios. She was the script doctor before anyone knew such medicine existed. The fixer who could look at a dying screenplay and identify precisely which organs were failing. She has seen thousands of scripts, most of them almost work. Nearly functioning machines with one gear slipping, one belt too loose, one crucial connection missing that keeps the whole contraption from roaring to life. Where others saw mess, she saw mechanics. Seeger didn't invent structure, she fixed broken scripts. Her approach wasn't theoretical, it was surgical. Precise incisions, careful extractions, the occasional transplant of scenes. She worked with the materials on the table, not the ideal screenplay that existed only in workshops and textbooks. Her questions are always practical. What isn't landing? Why isn't it landing? And what's the smallest intervention that saves the draft? No grand theories of human consciousness or mythological cycles, just the unflinching assessment of what wasn't working and the clearest path to make it work. Seeger matters when a script nearly works, but something's off. The audience laughs in the wrong places, checks their watches in the third act. Feedback feels vague or contradictory, leaving you drowning in notes that point everywhere and nowhere. The issue isn't structure, it's clarity. The difference between what you think you're communicating and what the audience actually receives. She never promised art, she promised functionality. The difference between a screenplay that delivers its intended effect and one that doesn't. Between characters who feel authentic and those who feel manufactured. And in the real world, that's often the difference between a rewrite and a drawer, between a green light and a polite pass, between a career and a hobby. Seeger understood what most theorists forget. Even the most brilliant screenplay is worthless if it can't be produced, and production requires scripts that actually work. Case file, John York, The Shape of Change. York comes through television, not theory-first television, production television, where deadlines loom like executioners and ratings are the only jury that matters. The kind of television where academic debates about narrative theory fade into white noise against the harsh reality of keeping viewers from changing the channel. As a senior figure at the BBC and Channel 4, he was responsible for long-running dramas that lived or died on escalation, momentum and emotional payoff over time. Shows where writers' rooms battled weekly to maintain the delicate balance between familiarity and surprise, where character arcs had to unfold at precisely the right pace to keep audiences invested through season after grueling season. That's why York doesn't sell beats. He maps inevitability. He doesn't peddle formulas scribbled on cocktail napkins by screenwriting gurus who haven't been in a production meeting this century. Instead, he excavates the deeper patterns beneath storytelling, the tectonic shifts that make narrative movement feel both surprising and unavoidable. His focus isn't plot points, it's change. How stories move from order to chaos and back again or don't. How characters transform through conflict. How worlds destabilise and reconfigure. How the very DNA of a narrative mutates under pressure. He understands that true dramatic tension comes not from arbitrary twists, but from the relentless logic of cause and effect playing out across character, setting and theme. York is invaluable when you're writing long-form television where sustaining momentum across episodes and seasons require more than clever cliffhangers. Or when episodic arcs keep stalling, leaving characters trapped in repetitive situations that feel increasingly hollow. Or when you need escalation without gimmicks, authentic intensification that emerges organically from character and circumstance. He doesn't tell you what to write, he tells you why something must happen next. Not because some structural template demands it, but because the internal logic of your story, its psychological truth, demands it. In York's world, structure isn't imposed from without, it emerges from within, as inevitable as gravity. Case file: Christopher Booker and John Truby, the reductionists. These two did what most writers and teachers were afraid to do. They took the sprawling, chaotic mess of storytelling and reduced it. While others built even more elaborate theories, Booker and Truby cut away what they considered excess until only the underlying shape remained. They were minimalists in a maximalist's field. Whiskey neat, not cocktails. Booker reduced stories to recurring mythic forms, broad narrative silhouettes that repeat across culture and centuries. 7 basic plots, he argued, underpin everything from ancient myth to modern blockbuster. The quest, rags to riches, voyage and return, comedy, tragedy, rebirth. Not inventions, patterns. Truby turned inward. He mapped the forces beneath visible action. The psychological pressures that move characters towards inevitable confrontation with themselves. Where Booker tracked shape, Truby tracked motion. Neither cared much for surface detail or cultural ornament. They hunted archetype, following the same tracks across generations of stories. These are not formulas, they're lenses. Tools for recognising structure, not manufacturing it. X-ray visions for seeing the skeleton beneath the flesh. Use them when you're drowning in complications, when options have spawned into immobility, when you must discern what form you're truly sketching. Use them to strip away story to its bones and test whether it still stands. They do not build engines, they reveal outlines. Their power lies not in prescription, but in recognition, in naming the shapes we've been drawing in the dark since the first stories were told. These represent merely a handful of the impacted mavericks operating at the periphery of paradigm territory. Consider this your motivation to conduct your own investigation. So why are they here, and why didn't they form a school? These thinkers don't agree, they don't align, they don't build a unified system. They never have, they never will. Each one works from a different corner, eyeing the others with professional scepticism and, at times, open disdain. That's the point. They're specialists. Outliers matter when orthodoxy fails, when 3-act structure suffocates or characters won't change on schedule. They offer alternative routes through unmapped terrain. This is just a field kit of worn tools. Use when needed, trust your instinct to try elsewhere. That's craft, unsentimental work making story function, imperfect practice over perfect systems, separating explainers from survivors, writing alone. There's a PDF ready for download along with the previous 12 case files, your written brief on what we've covered and how to use them in your own work. Take them, study them, keep them close. Bonus case file closed, file sealed. Keep it in the drawer, you'll know when to reach for it. I'm Terry Dre, this is Investigation Anatomy of Story. Until the next investigation is opened, be seeing you.